Meeting to order. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before I have remarks for you, but before we do, would you mind doing the roll call now?
All right, as I call your name, please say aye. Dwayne Barton. Norma Baines.
Aye.
Renata Conyers.
Aye.
Christopher Gordon.
Here.
Roy Harris.
Here, I'm looking for the tea party.
Shonda Jackson. Oh, I'm sorry, Joyce Harrison. Sorry. I'm here. Sorry. Shonda Jackson. Kimberly Jones. Dewana Little, I'm here. Tamari Macon. Babette Mays. Present. Linda McDowell.
Present.
Tamara Miller. Dwight Mullen.
Present.
Mildred Nance Carson.
Present.
Bernard Oliphant.
Present?
Thomas Priester. Dwayne Richardson. Eric Robinson.
Present.
Renita Waters. Present. CeCe Weston. Present. Dee Williams. Here. MZ Yehuda.
Present.
Keith Young.
Here.
There is a quorum. Alternates. Dee Burris. Here. Tiffany Devla. Here. Shakiki Giles Bayton. Here. Osandu McPeters.
Here. We do have a quorum. Before we go to approval of the minutes, I'd like to ask you all, with our minutes and our record from the previous meeting, we were having trouble with the audio and visual. It just was not picking up well. So you see the microphones have been moved closer. But as you make comments, I'm going to ask you to speak as though you're speaking into the mic, even though you're far away. Project your voice, please. And it becomes important as amendments might be proposed or seconded, particularly. We're trying to get an accurate record on this. And also, as we're speaking, it gets confusing as we're trying to keep notes and records if we're speaking at the same time. So if you could direct your comments to me as you speak into the mic, I can recognize you and we can be in sequence with our comments. But before we get going, I have a couple of remarks for you. One is Happy New Year, Shu. Happy New Year. This is 2023. We're supposed to be in flying cars. But next weekend is something I wanted to bring to your attention. Next weekend is Martin Luther King weekend. It's a celebration of his birth. And I thought that as members of the commission, the Reparations Commission, you might be asked about what that means. And I appreciate several of you already taking positions and making yourselves available for media interviews. And I appreciate that. You're putting forth a good face on, as we move forward. In fact, here's one of our media stars now, Mr. Richardson. And your comments are being taken not simply because of who you are as members of the Reparations Commission, but what you're doing is educating the public about what we are doing, and you're educating each other about where we need to go. This is a new process. And so, as we move forward into Martin Luther King's weekend, let me suggest something to you. Is that when he started this with the Montgomery bus boycott, it was so ill-planned and ill-considered that they had not considered it to be what it became. They thought it was going to be a one-day action. The Montgomery bus boycott turned out to be a whole year that they had to organize on the fly. It had never been done before. And let me suggest to you that it took over 10 years for King to do what he got done with the help of others and others leading in their own capacities. It was not a one-man show. This is an important precedent for us. As we talk about not having a precedent for reparations commissions, we have to look to see where there might be precedent. King had no blueprint. He had no idea that what he would end up doing is challenging a status quo that everyone told him was unchallengeable. No one thought when he started that it would bring down Jim Crow segregation. No one. It was a pipe dream. Does that sound familiar? And think about it. Within 10 years of the Montgomery bus boycott, federal law had changed to end Jim Crow segregation. And that was just the first of 3 major acts. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and the Fair Housing Act of 68. The Civil Rights Act, you know the price he paid for that in terms of the boycotts and the marching on Washington and the carrying on in Birmingham, the dogs, the children's campaign, all that. Criticized up the wazoo. I mean, if you remember, it was that Selma March that brought around the Voting Rights Act. A global shame of beating people with barbed wire wrapped batons. He didn't plan that. And it took his life for the third one. The Fair Housing Act was passed as a result of the assassination of Martin Luther King. So what we are doing here matters. Don't think that because we don't have a blueprint or we're shaky about process and procedure or because we don't have the budget in place or it defies precedent, don't think that we don't know what we're doing, we're headed in the right place. We are. It just takes time and it takes us believing in each other. I've heard a lot of discouragement. It comes through me. I've heard a lot of it about what we can't do. And I'm here to say to you, we're only sitting at this table because we believe we can do. And I'm thoroughly encouraging you to keep with that process. And I mean to preach at you now, because 23 is going to be a hard year. And the Martin Luther King weekend coming next week is the beginning of that hard year. It will continue with that as each of your IFAs bring forward proposals. And let me suggest to you this. Don't be conservative. We know what we need in your own capacities. And I'm reading your reports, I'm reading the minutes. You're getting beyond what I understand your particular areas to be. I'm feeling as though, I'm glad they got this. Because you're coming up with really, really sound, technically based ideas. Keep up with it. Because where they're going to go is going to set a precedent, and it's going to tell you that your time here was well spent. And I appreciate your efforts. Appreciate you too.
Can I say one thing?
Please, Mr. Oliphant.
Yes, we can. Oh, but no, you can't.
Thank you. That's why you got to respect your elders, man. But you're looking for precedent. Sometimes it's in your face and you don't see it. Next weekend, think about what gets talked about around town or in the media. And look at how it might apply to what we're doing here with reparations. Think about King having opened the door, and we are now figuring out how to walk through it. It's not been done. It's not been done, but we're going to do it. There's an action item on the agenda. Approval of the agenda. There are missing items. If there are things that are misstated, please feel free to point it out. I'm going to take your silence as approval. Is that permissible? Yes. For the agenda? Yes. Thank you. And action item, approval of the minutes. May I have a formal motion on that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Questions, comments? Please.
Do we have some addendums to the minutes? In the last meeting, we discussed maybe moving the presentations from IFA to the front of the meeting versus to the rear. And I noticed at this time that we do have it on the agenda to present. So the question is, should we enter that in the minutes so that if something comes up later, that it has been noted?
Thank you, it will be added.
Okay.
It will be. It's difficult because of the old business, new business structure, but we can do better.
I understand. Okay, fine. I'm trying to remember what my second one was. I had a second one.
That's because I interrupted you.
At the last meeting, and I'm assuming this is gonna be in here, I haven't looked at the rest of this. We talked about, safety in the meeting. I'm assuming that's gonna be put in here, and that's on the agenda?
Yes, we're going to partly address it in code of ethics review.
That's it.
Questions, comments? If seeing none, may I look for your voice approval of the minutes? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Thank you. Please know that with any minutes, as far as I'm concerned, if there are questions, if there are changes as you study through them, you find mistakes, we can go back. We can go back. Ms. Edwards, would you please go through the review of the December 5th meeting survey data?
All right, absolutely. Good evening. I hope y'all are doing good. Happy New Year. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the survey data. Hopefully you all have had a chance to review it. We got 10 responses from the post-meeting survey from December 5th, and they were overwhelmingly majority positive responses. The first question asked, did you have the opportunity to express your ideas, thoughts, and opinions? And a majority answered yes. 2 answered no, but did not provide an explanation in the text box. For the next question, rate your overall assessment. Majority responded with moderately satisfied to very satisfied. And then when it comes to the comments about what folks liked about the December 5th meeting, the communication flow, wanting to, really appreciating the presentations by the IFA group, and then going over the proposal to stop the harm was a positive point. Items that folks believe we needed improving during the December 5th meeting include just really addressing when commission members are speaking over one another, and making sure that the whole commission has complete verbiage and drafts of recommendations prior to voting. So we're going to work on making sure that you have all of these documents ahead of time so that you have time to review. And also, we stated earlier about just making sure you speak clearly, and we're going to make sure that we identify folks as they're speaking so that no one is talking over one another. Let's see. Wanting to move the recommendation process forward, and then just too many topics and really wanting to hone in on what's important in these meetings. Some suggestions for future agenda topics includes group definition of reparations. We do hope to touch on that today. There's a comment about the commission hiring, or rather filling more spaces on the commission. There is a comment about legalities and conflicts of interest. So these are definitely things that we're going to be bringing up as we move along. And obviously we want you to know that we're reading your responses in these surveys. They are confidential to the point where we don't know who is writing these comments, but they're not, they are public. They are public, but they are anonymous. All right, so those are your survey responses. We got 10 responses this time. I think it would be great if we can get some more. So I'm going to send out the post-meeting survey after tonight, and I hope to hear from you. Thank you.
Questions, comments?
So on question 5 about the suggestions, and she stated that about the hiring and as far as the new members being brought upon. So based upon this, our onboarding guide, like on page 18, it says that like if a commission member is unable to fulfill their duties, like alternates will be essentially asked to step in. And so like I did notice that I think we've had 2 or 3 new members who have been brought on. And so that kind of conflicts with like what our guide is. So that wasn't my comment. There was discussion and talks about that. And so we're just trying to figure out what happened with that.
Got it. I think that, and feel free to correct me where I'm wrong, but I think that was a appointment from the neighborhood. So there's separate kinds of appointments. I'm gonna defer to Ms. Mills to fill in.
So appointment, depending on how you were appointed. So you were appointed by the city of Asheville.
when we have a vacancy on the city side of our appointments of the 5, you or Tiffany will be asked if you are willing to step up, and then the council will make that decision. The 2 that were replaced, Tamara Miller and Eric Robertson, were from Housing Authority. So they have to make those appointments. So how you came into the commission is how you remain coming into the commission. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. I was just trying to figure, I mean, it wasn't discussed when,
Sure.
so we just heard, hey, we have new members, and so we are all kind of like, what's going on with that? So in response to that,
Yeah.
can we get an updated project team list and commission member list? Because I noticed that what I have here in the folder, I guess is now outdated, and so that needs to be updated as well.
Absolutely, yes.
More questions, comments? Thank you. That's good. Excuse me. More questions, comments? We move to old business. In your packet that you received, there's a copy of a new proposal for a code of ethics. To introduce this to you, we've asked the city attorney, Brad Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everybody. I think you introduced me enough, and I believe all of you have had a chance to see and/or get tired of hearing from me at this point, so I won't bother you going into any more detail. Myself and Michael Crew have been working on putting together a proposed code of ethics and rules of conduct. And I believe, as the chair just mentioned, a copy of that is included in your packet. You are not required at this point to have fully read that and digested it. I will tell you that this has been produced in response to the request from the committee to provide some additional guidelines about how you are to conduct yourself, to answer some questions that have arisen about what issues might arise in the form of conflicts of interest, and what, if any, actions can this body take to address those issues when they pop up and become problematic. It is not at all unusual for public bodies such as yourself to have both rules of procedure, as you do, and a code of ethics, as is prepared for your consideration this evening. In fact, the code of ethics that we put together for you is modeled very closely after what the Asheville City Council and the Buncombe County Commissioners utilize themselves as their code of ethics. So this is fairly standard language, and very quickly this evening, I just want to go over at a broad level what is in that document so that you have a sense of it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you've got about that, and I will encourage you to think about this in terms of what it is. A code of ethics is less about very specific rules and much more about providing you reminders about what the areas of concern are and the level of trustworthiness and cooperation that facilitates the kind of work that will allow you to do the very best job that you can in your role. So if I can, very briefly, the proposed document, which again is titled Code of Ethics and Rules of Conduct, is made up of 9 sections. The preamble is merely cursory. It gives some indication of why you would be going about establishing a code of ethics, but we don't need to go over that. And I think I can read very quickly the first sentence of the Code of Ethics, because I think this memorializes why you would want to do this. It says, the purpose of the Code of Ethics and Rules of Conduct is to establish guidelines for ethical standards for the Community Reparations Commission. And I'll skip ahead. And to help determine what conduct is appropriate in particular cases. It is meant to supplement and not replace the existing rules of procedure that you have, as well as the statement of commitment that you executed when you were appointed to this commission. So very broadly, I'll go right into section 1 and tell you that without reading all of this, this is intended in the initial section to remind you that acting ethically is a component to the success of this body. And in fact, most of this is common sense. And we always tell people when we're helping them analyze ethics rules is, what do you believe you should be? doing? What do you believe would be the most appropriate conduct if I simply say the word ethics? And that's really what this first section is. And just briefly, it notes that the work of this commission depends upon public confidence in the integrity of this body, the responsible exercise of the trust conferred by the local governments which form the commission, and the mutual respect and ethical treatment among the membership. I think that encompasses everything else in that section. It is the high ideals which you have striven to uphold as part of your work. Section 2, it goes into a little more detail, asking you to respect the law as well as each other's opinions. It requires you to obey the applicable laws, and we'll talk a little more about that in just a second. But it also makes sure that every one of you should feel free to express and assert your positions without fear of reprisal, and that includes from the commissioners, the facilitators, city and county staff, and the community members. That leads us into section 3, where we ask you to act with integrity. There are specifics laid out, and we can just hit on a few of them, but I've already mentioned. Exercising respect toward everyone, exhibiting trustworthiness, using your independent judgment, remaining incorruptible, treating other commission members and the public with respect even when others may disagree with your opinions, fostering an environment of open communication, and not behaving in ways that would reflect badly upon the commission. We'll move now into the opposite side of this coin, which section 4 begins to talk about the impropriety. And we don't have to go into too much detail. Impropriety, over and above conflicts of interest, very different subtly but importantly, because impropriety means you are actually doing something wrong. Whether that is conscious or unconscious, it is very important to avoid even the appearance of impropriety because it taints what the commission is doing. And it is also very important to know that if there is, either in yourself or another commission member, some semblance or possibility of impropriety, that you disclose that to the chair, the facilitators, or to city and county staff so that we can help you address those issues. The test of this is pretty simple. It's whether or not a reasonable person, given all the knowledge about the circumstance, would consider the act to be wrong. So keep that in mind. Section number 5 asks you to disclose these potential issues to the attorneys. This is one of the reasons that we're here. We're here to help you navigate through this process so that you can worry about the business which you're charged to do, and let us help assist you with the rules and the minutiae of that. Section 6 goes into a little more about the duties of your membership. It asks you to act as especially responsible citizens who others can trust and respect, and to set a good example for others. But more specifically, it asks that you faithfully attend these meetings, that you prepare for these meetings, that you analyze the information that's given to you so that you can make the best decisions about it, and that you bear your fair share of the commission's workload. And always, and I think importantly, you put the commission's interest above your individual interest. Section 7 goes into some of those laws we talked about earlier and reminds you that transparency and compliance are also important aspects of this body's work. What you do is being done in the public eye. We record these, we invite the public, we ask them to be able to speak. So remember that your meetings, even when you're not part of this body or part of your individual focus areas, they need to be public meetings. And we can help you notice those meetings, but always be careful that you're not breaking those rules and meeting outside the public eye. And keeping your records, because those are public records, they are the people's records. And we want to make sure that nothing gets lost in the process of your work. Section 8, this talks about conflict of interest. Different from an impropriety. An impropriety truly is something that's wrong. But a conflict of interest may happen whether you intended something bad or not. It just may be a result of your business association, your familiar associations. And the most important thing is that you disclose those to us. It may be no more work than just recusing you on a certain vote, making sure the chair is aware of that. But please, 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 bring those to our attention. Even if it's not a conflict, we'll help you work through that and answer that question and make sure that the votes you take are not tarnished by any potential conflicts. And then finally, and I think interestingly, we've added section 9, which is the final section, which gives you the power as a body to address any issues or violations of this code if you choose to adopt it. It gives you 2 powers. One is the power of what we call censure. which is a public expression of formal disapproval of someone's actions. Understand that this is generally the limit of what public bodies can do, except for some very extreme circumstances. It does not remove that member from the body or take away any voting rights, but it does very publicly reprimand them. The second and more extreme is a recommendation to remove a member. Because you are not the body that formed yourself, the final decision and power of removal lies with the appointing governing bodies, the city council and the county commission. But you can make a very powerful recommendation to those boards to remove a member in these circumstances if you so choose. So those avenues of redress have been included in your rules. So I know I've gone over that quickly, but you do have it in your packet. You're not voting this evening, so you'll have some opportunity to go through that. And I'm happy to answer any questions you've got tonight. But extend that outside of this. Michael Frew and I are at your disposal to answer any questions that you would have beyond tonight's meeting about those rules. And as I mentioned to Chair a minute ago, these are your rules. We've given you a form. It's fairly standard for what public bodies use. We've tried to tailor it to your needs, but don't take our word for it. We want you to help be the creators of your path forward, and these guardrails are going to allow you to do that. So please don't hesitate to offer any recommended edits, additions, or changes that you'd like. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Brad, going in, a lot of us expressed, or I did anyway, some potential conflicts of interest, which looks like in my work with several community groups that have real estate dealings with the city of Asheville. And I guess it would come down to a simple recusal if that vote were to come up. Is that correct? Or how do we do that? I've already expressed it. I hope it's in the minutes somewhere, but I don't know. I haven't been looking at them that closely, but just do want to make that announcement.
Well, thank you for that question, Dee. And first, let me thank you because you've done the first thing that we would ask in the three-step process, and that's to bring it to the attention of the commission or the attorneys. The second step is always to let us analyze it for you and determine if a conflict does exist, and if it does, this is not something that's wrong. It just merely needs to be addressed, and we would address it exactly as you suggested. We'd let you recuse yourself if a conflict exists, and the vote would take place as planned with the remaining members. So there's never anything wrong with a conflict. There's something wrong with an undisclosed conflict. So simply disclosing that to us lets us lead you through the process to address it and move on with the votes.
I have a sub-part and then I'll cease. When we're dealing with work that originates with individuals, and just not me, but other people who are on this commission, and it's a body of work that was done prior to the creation of this committee that is used, how is that work regarded? Since it's intellectual property, so to speak, whether or not it's copyrighted or trademarked, but it is just that intellectual property. And the only thing, folks don't need to get paid for it, at least in my case, I don't. It was done to benefit the community and given freely. From an ethical standpoint, is that something that needs to be addressed as far as giving people credit for it? I don't know. How is that going to be done when it's utilized as a body of information by this group to take deliberative action?
Well, first and foremost, I would say asking the question is always a good first step. To let us know you think this might be something to address. But I would answer you by saying that each one of you were brought into this commission for a reason. And it's the expertise, the understanding, the institutional knowledge about what this community has been through, what individual neighborhoods have been through, and your own expertise within your fields. That allows us to benefit from your assets. And we don't expect that any one of you will leave those at the door. You bring those things with you, including things like intellectual property, and it benefits this group. Where we would draw the line, and it's a line only of potential conflict of interest, in that we don't want you to take it so far as to allow votes you would take and actions by this commission to give you an additional economic benefit. But recognition of your capabilities and what you bring to this probably does not cross that line, Dee. But always, on a case-by-case basis, Michael and I are happy to analyze those situations.
Thank you.
Other questions? If questions arise as you read through and study this code of review, it will come up in the next agenda during our next meeting, so it can be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're at old business B, revisit the role of commission, definition of reparations. My comment here is that Mr. McPeters has already done, and Sandra has already given you a guidance on what I think is a proper review of our mission by encouraging you, and I strongly encourage you to reread our onboarding guide, the notebooks. Just go back through it. Remind yourself of the things we agreed to at the beginning. For those of you who don't have notebooks, it's online for the most part under the city. But please reread that. And in terms of the definition of reparations, let me say this to you, is that that's a ground I think most of you are already walking. As many of you know, I taught for so many years. And rather than spend time that was valuable for me to spend on other parts of the curriculum, I often avoided formal definitions. And I came to them at the end rather at the beginning, because then folk could appreciate the parameters of what we were talking about. But most of you are already talking about dealing with the definition of reparations because you've operationalized it, and you are operationalizing it already in your focus areas. The way you apply the addressing of these issues is exactly what reparations is about. You can't do it without first identifying the problem, and then you go about the business of discussion of how to meet that problem. That's the essence of reparations. But we will get into it further, and this is the two routes I would love to propose to you. No vote necessary. One, that I'm more than happy to host virtual or in-person meetings with commissioners or even public members of the public about the definition of and discussion of your questions regarding reparations.
Is that,
Please. Please.
From a legal standpoint, the definition of reparations as espoused and utilized by the federal government versus, and I'm getting a lot of that from people in the community who really understand what reparations means and the bandwidth, the economic bandwidth that municipalities and local governments, what is owed has been estimated by most economists and political economists at that, as you could put together all the municipal, local, and state governments, and they still wouldn't have the economic bandwidth to pay back all of the harms that have been done to black folks in this country.
You remember the conversation with Professor, come on, y'all.
Sandy
Darity.
Yes.
Was went over that with us.
He's one political economist.
Yes.
There's another one in Atlanta named Anthony Kimbrough.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to go to Durham and talk to them, and it's a chocolate city. Y'all pardon me for using that term. Durham is pretty much a chocolate city, and they do not have they do not use the term reparations as far as from an economic standpoint. And I guess I'm just concerned about the legal fire that it's going to draw, because it is not real reparations such that it is something that has been massaged that only the federal government has the bandwidth to do. That's number one. I'm concerned simply because of the fact, another fact, not only the legalities of it, but the time and economic resources that we're probably going to spend in lawsuits dealing with it. I'm coming from a realistic standpoint. It sounds good on somebody's resume, and it looks good when you go on a tour talking about you did reparations in Asheville, but all you did was probably $25,000 worth of housing vouchers like Evanston or Illinois.
Yeah, Dee, this is the reason why I think that an informal conversation outside of the confines of this time frame for this meeting is more appropriate. And let me go on. Is that the definition of reparations as Commissioner Williams is presenting it doesn't cover what we might need to talk about in terms of health care or in terms of education, which we've also been chartered to do. Reparations is a very broad term, or we can choose to have a legalistic term. It's really dependent on you. Now, the way that we have been assigned by the city and by the county is to count the closing of disparities in public policy areas as a part of reparations. But how we do that and whether or not what we choose to focus on, and even in terms of preparations to defend our position, might need to take a different type of place other than this meeting. And I'm more than happy to host that meeting online or in person. If you could, on your survey, indicate that, we could try to arrange it. But I'm kind of anxious to get through this agenda, if you don't mind. We have a presentation from the city and county as a response to the immediate recommendations regarding, I've been nicknaming it Stop the Harm. We have representatives from the city and from the county. Rachel Wood and DK Wesley. Is DK?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rachel Wood, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to be leading this presentation, but just know that this was developed in partnership with Buncombe County. DK Wesley, my counterpart and Assistant County Manager, is also here and can answer questions from the county side. And attached with the agenda was a copy of the draft resolution. We've also got a paper copy available for you. You should have had it at your seat when you sat down this evening. That just outlines the draft resolution that we're going to be bringing forward to City Council as well as the Buncombe County Commission later this month for consideration. So this evening what I'm going to do is walk through our response plan to that immediate recommendation that you approved back in December, answer any questions you have, and then get any preliminary feedback from this group regarding that draft resolution. So as I mentioned at your last meeting, the Reparations Commission passed an immediate recommendation to end further harm by ceasing repetition of institutional processes that led to racially disparate outcomes. That recommendation included a call for both the city and the county to conduct an official audit to ensure compliance with federal and state laws, regulatory bodies, codes of conduct, court orders, consent decrees, confirming that no further harm to the African American community would be committed. City and County Commission, as I already mentioned, will consider adoption of a resolution authorizing staff to develop a scope of work that will then lead to the selection of a firm to conduct the requested audit. And we, of course, want to get your feedback on that resolution authorizing staff to do that work prior to bringing it forward to City Council and County Commission for their consideration. Upon approval of that resolution, city and county staff are going to work with the Community Reparations Commission as well as with our project manager, Civility Localized, to develop that scope of work, which will then be used in turn to advertise and select a firm and then review and prioritize those remediation opportunities that are identified in the audit. The scope of work, audit firm selection process, and review and prioritization of those opportunities will be discussed monthly with this Reparations Commission to make sure you're aware of the status, but also more importantly to make sure that we're incorporating your feedback throughout the process as we go. So just a really quick reminder, I know we've had holidays since your last Reparations Commission meeting. At your December 5th meeting, your immediate recommendation to the city and county included providing assurance and taking effective measures to end ongoing and current harms due to intentional and unintentional policies, programs, practices, and procedures. And this language that I have on here is just a summarization of that immediate recommendation that you adopted back in December. As I already mentioned, it called for the city and county to conduct an audit to ensure compliance with federal and state laws, regulatory bodies, codes of conduct, court orders, and consent decrees. And the audit will demonstrate that the cessation of harm has occurred and will prevent further harm or threats to African Americans. The immediate recommendation also recommended that the city and county promote and enforce codes of conduct and ethical norms and take ongoing measures to foster confidence building between government and African Americans, truth-seeking mechanisms and processes, as well as timely accountability of the dispensation of recommendations. So a quick overview of that draft resolution, and to make sure you're looking at the most updated version, we got some feedback from Dr. Mullen on Friday. It's the version that's got some red text at the bottom, just if you're looking through your papers and want to know which version is the most current. But the draft resolution, as we are currently planning to bring to the City Council and Buncombe County Commission for consideration, first describes in the preamble the vote that was taken by the Community Reparations Commission at your December 5th meeting, approving that immediate recommendation. Summarizes the call to conduct an official audit to ensure compliance with federal and state laws, as well as other codes of conduct and court orders, ensuring that the city and county have ceased to inflict further harm on the African American community, and then directs the city and county staff, and if you read in the resolution, it's direction directly to the city manager and to the county manager to collaborate with the other governmental entity as well as with the Community Reparations Commission to develop a scope of work and a formal solicitation to select a firm to conduct the recommended audit. So we want to make sure that that scope of work, what it is that we're advertising for, meets the spirit of what was included in the immediate recommendation prior to advertising that and ultimately selecting a firm. And then upon audit completion, an important part of this resolution is that it commits to reviewing and prioritizing those audit findings to remediate the perpetuation of further harm. So once we have those audit findings, we'll be coming back to you regularly. It won't be you just authorize the scope of work and then we come back to you and say, here are the recommendations. But we'll be working with the full body as the Reparations Commission, as well as the impact focus areas on how it is that we implement those recommendations, which I think is the most important part, reading back through that immediate recommendation that you approved last month. So really quickly to provide a timeline, because we do have a sense of urgency, we want to make sure that we're getting you these recommendations and getting your reaction as quickly as possible. So you approved that immediate recommendation at your last meeting. Of course, we're here this evening to seek your feedback and let you know that we've drafted this resolution. And then January 17th is a big day. On the 17th, the City Council's new Equity and Engagement Committee is going to receive a briefing on the contents of the draft resolution. That evening, the Buncombe County Commission is also going to receive a briefing on the contents of the draft resolution, and feedback will be provided. Then at the January 24th City Council meeting, the City Council will consider adoption of the draft resolution, followed by the Buncombe County Commission considering adoption at their February 7th meeting. So by the time we come back to you at your February 20th meeting, hopefully we'll have those adopted resolutions from the City Council and the County Commission. And we're going to be working over the course of the next several weeks with your chair, with your vice chair, hopefully being able to incorporate feedback from all of you on a proposed draft scope of work for this audit firm. And so we plan to come back to you at your February 20th meeting with that draft scope of work for you to provide feedback to us at that time. And then we hope by your March 20th meeting to be able to finalize that scope of work with you. And as soon as we're able to finalize that scope of work, then we'll be able to finalize the corresponding solicitation to ultimately select that firm who will then conduct the audit. So our hope is that we'll be able to finalize that solicitation, advertise the solicitation, and select a firm this spring, with the audit being conducted and completed this summer. And then we'll have that ongoing. We're hopeful to have a regular monthly recurring standing agenda item where we can talk to you about the process up until we're able to select the audit firm, and then also talk about the progress. And most importantly, once that audit is completed, work with you on how we implement those recommendations from the audit. So I've provided a couple of terms that I know I've worked in local government my entire career. Some of you who maybe have not worked in local government, I just want to make sure we're all kind of clear on what some of these definitions include. So when I say scope of work, that's a detailed description of the work, milestones, and timeline necessary to fully complete the recommended audit. And to us, this is the most important part because, like I said earlier, we want to make sure from the city side and the county side that the solicitation that's advertised is for the correct type of firm doing the correct type of work to ensure that we are responding accordingly to that immediate recommendation that you approved in December. And when I say solicitation, typically in local government, that's either a request for proposals or a request for qualifications. But that's a public advertisement to vendors to review the scope of work that we will be preparing with you in collaboration, and then for them to submit responses that will be vetted to consider the best qualified firm to conduct that requested audit. The audit report would be the deliverable that we're requesting from that vendor. So that'll be a detailed overview of the firm's key findings from their assessment of both the city and the county, to include detailed recommendations on policy and operational revisions needed to ensure the cessation of further harm. And then when we say evaluation and prioritization, that again is from the city and county's purview, the most important component, and that is where we'll be working with you to review those findings from the audit report, prioritize opportunities to ensure the cessation of prevention and future harm. So that's where we'll be working with this group as well as with the impact focus areas. And then audit resources, this was a question that came up when we met with the chair on Friday. The current plan on the city and county side is to fund the payment to the audit firm, the vendor that is selected, from previously approved city and county reparations resources. And until we get that scope of work defined and until we advertise, we won't be able to say specifically what that dollar value would be at this time. And so that concludes the brief overview. This is just repeating the key takeaways that I already went through. But we are very interested from the city and county side to find out what feedback you have on the draft resolution, and most importantly, make sure that this body is comfortable with us bringing forward the resolution as proposed for the city council as well as the Buncombe County Commission consideration.
I think this is cool, but there's some existing momentum that's affecting African American neighborhoods right now, and they in motion. Bulldozers are moving, the plans are made. Now, how are we going to address that? Because by the time we figure this out, more homes, more communities are going to be redeveloped, gentrified, more people are going to be pushed out. So I think, okay, let's do an audit, but what are we going to do on immediate to protect community, black communities, and what investments are we going to make in land so that when we do figure out what the hustle is, there's actually land that we can build on as an African American community economically and stuff like that. So and another thing I want to say, there's a lot of initiatives, Justice 40, the Inflation Reduction Act, this federal policy initiatives right now that would give momentum to our work that we're doing right here in our community. And I think being able to connect those existing policy initiatives, even with the state DOT, the state did their disparity study about a year ago. So how do we connect into those existing policies as similar goals as this Reparations Commission to address some of these much needed needs, like right now? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, and well-made comments. In terms of responding to the immediate recommendation, I totally understand what you're saying. There is a lot of work that's going on. We want to make sure that we're able to incorporate that as we're looking at the findings. This is about as quickly as the city and county could get mobilized in terms of getting the city council and county commission authorization. But that by no means that city staff and county staff can't continue working with this group, working with state, federal, and other local groups to make sure that as this group is making recommendations that we're not missing opportunities in the meantime. So I don't think that they're mutually exclusive, and I think we just need to be really mindful of staying up to date on progress that's happening across the community, statewide, and across the nation.
Yeah, I want to give you an example. The I-26 connector, that's a big deal. That's going to affect Burton Street, Hillcrest, and right now I'm going to those meetings, and there's a disconnect and opportunities for those communities to take advantage of. And that's a big project, the money made, people planning, people building, everybody's in. And we have this, I want to say, Justice 40 initiative that specifically target neighborhoods who've been wrongly harmed in the past. And I don't see a collective consciousness on how we can build off of that based on the work that we're doing here. And I think that's just one example that I can think of off the top of my head, that I think more energy should be showed, should be given to the momentum that's already happening around the country, around trying to protect these African American communities.
So one key thing that definitely speaks to what Dwayne is talking about is the original recommendation that we passed spoke to several issues. It was not limited to the audit. You know what I mean? Like, it spoke to several issues and stopping several issues at one time. And like, this presentation really has spoken to the audit as the main thing, but every aspect of that initial recommendation was the main thing, like immediate stop the harm areas, housing, criminal justice, like all of those things. The audit is a component of the total resolution, but there was other components that I think has been overlooked a little bit. And so I just wonder why the recommendation as it was written, and now we have a resolution, like what was the change? And like, what was the purpose? Like, every time we make a recommendation, is it go become a resolution? Like, I just want to understand process of how it's going to work moving forward, since this is really our first one. Well, naturally, it's our second one. And the first one wasn't a resolution, it was a statement. It was just a recommendation. But like, what determines whether it's a resolution or it's going to proceed as the recommendation, just as it was written and approved by this commission?
Sure.
I guess that's the question.
Yeah, and I'll start, and please let me know if I'm not responding accordingly. So for staff on the city and county side, reviewing that immediate recommendation, what we viewed as that first step was the audit. Of course, the city and county are making commitments to cease further harm where we're currently aware. The intent of the audit is to help us identify those areas that we may not be aware of already. So to us, that was an important first step. And so this resolution, with us operating under a council manager form of government, is the city council directing the city manager to then direct staff to perform this work. So we want to make sure that we've got that direction from our elected bodies in response to the immediate recommendation that was adopted on December 5th. And you're absolutely correct. So your recommendation included other components, and those are including those 3 bottom bullets: the confidence building, truth seeking, as well as timely accountability. And those are actually, at the recommendation of Dr. Mullen, have been added to the resolution. And that's something, to your point, that we do need to do a better job at future reparations commissions as city and county staff, coming back and explaining how it is that we're doing those things. And so that's something that we can certainly commit to doing at a future reparations commission. The immediate first step is really doing that assessment and that audit in terms of how it is that we're complying with those federal and state as well as local policies that have been enacted.
Rachel, will there be a performance audit and a financial audit? Or is this just a general term given? Why aren't they specified that way? And as follow-up to that, in the scope of work, would it pretty much align with the way that an inspector general, if he were to come here to Asheville to review the federal dollars that obtained at the local coffer, the kinds of items that they would look for as disparity goes and proving discrimination, is that going to be in the scope of work, or is that how it would be structured? Do you know?
Well, we haven't started drafting the scope of work yet, but we will certainly look at performance as well as financial components, and that draft scope of work that we bring forward to you at your next meeting for your feedback. We'll certainly want to make sure that we're incorporating any type of audit or any type of review that you would want to have included in the work that's performed by the vendor that's ultimately selected.
Just to double back to what Dwayne was asking a minute ago, we kind of went through various things after he asked the question, but are there actions that we can take to protect those communities, those properties, those things that are, as he's asked, immediately at risk right now? Are there actions that we can take or ways that we can legally protect that or create stoppages of things? I don't really even know how to ask the question, but are there ways that we can address in the immediate? Yes, we have process here, and sometimes process is slow, and it is what it is. But just as he's asked, the harms that those people are experiencing are happening right now. And so what measures can we take singularly to address what he's asked?
I think what we can do a better job of on the city and county staff side is providing you all with updates on things that we have going on more regularly. So the I-26 aesthetics and betterments work is a great example of a project where we could be bringing to you updates on where we are with that project and seeking feedback from this body. So that's something that we can certainly work towards, is making sure this group is more aware of some of that work that we have going on that has either direct or indirect ties to the work of the Reparations Commission.
Oh, I found the original recommendation, and just because I want to read the part that's actually missing. It is also recommended that the assurances be given that effective measures are taken to end continuing violations of access to equity and education, health and wellness, housing, economic development, and justice. And so like what Dwayne is speaking to is both housing and economic development opportunities, which is a part of the resolution that's not included in this recommendation overview. And so that's the part that I was trying to figure out. I had to find it so I could make sure my mind wasn't fooling me. And that's the part that we want to maintain. So like if current harms, this project, and communities that are either legacy communities or public housing developments that minimize beautification or not, that negatively impact Black people, that's a part of the recommendation, is minimizing that. So as we think about beautification and those type of reports, how do we get reports on how they plan to minimize the harm, the furtherance of harm to Black people, which is a part of the recommendation. And I think that, like, that's the stuff that's happening right now outside of the audit. This is something we know is happening outside of the audit. You don't need an audit for that project. You see what I'm saying? This is an actual thing happening and has been happening and talked about for years, actually. And so how do we figure out how this applies to that? Because I don't want the recommendation to be watered down to the point that, oh, it was just about an audit. We got the audit and you know what I mean? Like, no, it was about more than that. It's like we're doing this work. And for people who live in those communities, how do we go back to our community while we saying that we getting notices and we know that the plans to expand the highway is about to rip through our community and displace families that look like us, and then come to this table and listen to reports on landscape and aesthetics. You know what I mean? Like, that's a part of minimizing the harm, and so I would definitely want to see this included in the resolution in its fullness, not watered down. Whereas the recommendation is so that we can really be intentional about the outcomes and expectations, just as you want to feedback. So that's my feedback.
Sure, and if that's the direction of the commission, we can certainly revise the resolution. That's the reason we're here tonight, is we want to get feedback from you so we can make sure that the language in the resolution more closely mirrors the language that was included in the immediate recommendation as adopted on December 5th. We can definitely do that. And then we'll need to work through how, to your point, we bring back that information and have those intentional conversations with this group, as well as the impact focus areas.
Is there a way that we could connect with DOT or with the city or the county to be more aware of what they're planning to do in the future? I'm sure that's community knowledge, if you will, but if they could do presentations to say, well, we have plans to work in this sector and this highway is coming here, and we want to do this here. If we could connect with more of those departments and have them speak directly to us, that could probably cut through some of the lag, if you will, in what we're trying to accomplish versus what they're trying to move forward before we can have some say within it. Is that doable to speak with some of those?
Sure, and as we're meeting with the chair and the vice chair to plan future agendas, what DK and myself, as well as the city and county manager, the projects that we're aware of, we can mention those and identify where it makes sense to bring those forward for this group to discuss and review. Absolutely.
And I would just add one thing just to, wrap this conversation, but that's a great point that you bring up about learning more about city and county capital plans, what's already in the pipeline of what's going to be happening. And I'm sure, folks like Dwayne Richardson already know like what's going on, and these are the conversations that are going to be happening in your IFAs and that are already happening in your IFAs. And the thing that I really wanted to sort of land on is later in the agenda, we have a conversation about the proposal template and some guiding questions that's going to help you get those ideas out on paper so we can continue to bring those ideas to this body and get them, get them passed. And my hope is that the city and county will be just as responsive as they have been with this initial recommendation with these other recommendations that we continue to bring forward.
And to kind of close back out the recommended revisions that we got from the vice chair, we'll email an updated version of the draft resolution to members of this commission for any final feedback that you have, just to make sure we've incorporated that accordingly prior to city council as well as county commission consideration. They'll be briefed on it next week, and then at the end of the month in early February is when those votes will be taken. So we want to make sure we've got your feedback incorporated accordingly prior to those votes occurring.
And I would appreciate it if you send other comments to me directly so that I can include it in my comments to City Council and the County Commission on the 17th. I'd appreciate that. To be very frank with you, when this was drafted, what I had in mind was losing another class through the Asheville City Schools, as we talked about that. That's what I was thinking of, the human cost of preparation. So your comments are well taken. I appreciate any more that you have to be routed to us. Thank you. We have a presentation, Marcia. We have a presentation from Zedek's Social Justice Fund. Please.
First, I wanted to say hello and what an honor it is to be in front of this historic commission. I've been watching y'all online, and so the idea of being here with you in person is just amazing. So my name is Marcia Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Zedek Social Justice Fund. I'm here with Libby Kyle. She's the Director of Community-Led Grant Making at the Zedek Social Justice Fund. And I want to share with you a little bit of the work that we've been doing just in terms of private dollars and philanthropy's interest in reparations, but also in terms of our work as a fiscal sponsor of the Reparations Stakeholder Authority of Asheville, the RSAA. So Zedek is a private foundation. We redistribute money, power, and resources to support systems change and community healing in Asheville, North Carolina, particularly in the areas of racial justice, LGBTQ+ justice, and dismantling anti-Semitism. Most folks in community actually know about us from our Brilliance Awards and our Impact Award programs. That's a program where we do grants to individuals of $3,000 and $50,000 amounts, no strings attached grants that go to local social justice leaders here in Asheville. Since we started that program in 2018, we've dispersed already $1.1 million to approximately 200 individuals, over 70% of whom are people of color, predominantly Black. We've also started in the last 2 years a participatory grant-making program, or community-led grant-making program, that gives $250,000 from Zedek's budget each year, puts decision-making power in the hands of local social justice leaders, and they get to decide how that work is distributed. As I'm looking around the reparations commissions, I see a lot of folks who are connected to Zedek, Impact Award winners, Brilliance Award winners, and folks who are also just grantees of our organization, so it's amazing to be here with you. So to share a little bit about the Reparations Stakeholder Authority of Asheville, Zedek, we were approached by community leaders with the idea of starting a private fund holding it at the Zedek Social Justice Fund, and the goal of that private reparations fund is to collect funds from private institutions, predominantly white institutions, individuals and families that know already that they have financial benefit from the slave trade, from systemic racism against Black folks in our area. And to just use our, really our relational capital, our social capital as a fund, and also just our financial infrastructure to hold those funds while the city, while our Black communities determine what needs to happen with those funds. And we, as part of that conversation, we reached out to folks in Evanston, Illinois, and actually across the country with the reparations movements across the country. Specifically spoke to Robin Rue Simmons, who's the major Evanston alderwoman who was involved in pushing reparations legislation out in Evanston, Illinois. And and we also spoke to Sol Anderson, who's actually the CEO of the Evanston Community Foundation, who holds the Evanston's version of the Reparations Stakeholder Authority. And part of the reason we reached out to do this research is when community leaders reached out to us, our first thought was, how do we make sure we don't replicate the efforts that are already happening in our city? How do we make sure that we're walking in a way that's not taking away from the important historic work that's happening here, but that's actually a complement to what's already happening? And when we spoke to both leaders here locally, leaders from Evanston, folks across the nation, what became really clear is they realized that the work of reparations goes far beyond what can happen within a municipality. Like Commissioner Williams actually mentioned a little bit earlier today, is the importance of recognizing that reparations can sometimes go beyond a city government's or a county government's bandwidth. And that's what they saw actually happening in Evanston. And they realized that what they needed, in addition to the city's process, was a 501c3 structure to be able to hold some of the work that might not be able to happen within the city's structure. And so we are moving forward with, or have moved forward with, establishing this Reparations Stakeholder Authority of Asheville here for our community. The goal primarily is to pull together a membership-based organization that helps to determine where these private dollars that we've just been holding should go and how they should be used to support the reparations efforts. And I'll hand it over to Libby to tell you a little bit more about what the structure of that RSAA is.
So the RSA is a democratic membership based organization, and while Zedek is the fiscal sponsor, the RSAA is its own entity. It's one person, one vote. So no one person represents a group of people. Each individual has their own vote to cast. Each individual represents themselves and not any other organization. RSAA stakeholder membership is open to all Black Buncombe County residents ages 18 or older, regardless of housing or incarceration status. Right now, we are led by a steering committee that includes myself, how does your name just leave my head? Marsha, sorry. Libby and Marsha, Rob, Keith, and Thais Ruffin is joining us soon. Our current initiatives are private reparations funds, community education, collaborating with RJC and Black Asheville Demands, and then designing and implementing a comprehensive truth and reconciliation process, similar to the one led in Greensboro, to heal the harms of the 1979 massacre. Funds raised thus far is $241,615 from 43 donors since January 1st of 2022 in our soft launch. In informal conversations with local white-led churches, we continue to fundraise. We also invite our philanthropic organizations to join us. Had our first public event in November. We did Wakanda Forever. I hope I did see some of you at that event. We were able to host 155 people. We were at Regal Cinemas and we showed 2 showings of Black Panther. And it was a really great event, and it introduced lots of people to the RSAA. You want to show what's next?
Okay. So here's what's next. We are in the process of hiring our first full-time staff member, someone who's going to be based in Asheville, Black person, to lead these efforts to make sure that the RSAA is a separate entity from the Zedek Social Justice Fund. The person who was currently hired is, for medical reasons, can no longer join our team. So we're really happy to have this moment to share about the work of the RSAA here in this space, and also let you know that that hiring is going on. So feel free to take a look at that job description. We're gonna do widespread recruitment as well for the RSAA. The idea, making sure that each Black person in Buncombe County and the city of Asheville knows about this initiative. And specifically, we're working with WRES to launch a programming starting in February, speaking about the work of the RSAA, and also to do some community education about what reparations is beyond what's happening in Asheville. As most of y'all know, reparations efforts and organizers and activists and plans have been coming out since 1865, since Black folks have been since the abolition of slavery in 1865 in our country. It's a very long movement history. There are very long, very many details about it. Also, the UN has regulations regarding reparations, and so we're going to be doing our part in sharing just the information about what reparations is in general, but of course, not interacting or stepping over the work of the commission and speaking for, we're not taking the role of speaking for what's happening in the specific commission.
Not just not taking over, but also making sure that we position ourselves in a way that we are supporting. So we don't want to, we want us to be seen as partners in doing this work, because we recognize that what is typical in Asheville is that we get this narrative that says we can't work together. And we can. And so I really appreciate what you said earlier, Dr. Mullen, as you referenced Dr. King, and then your elder said, yes, we can, no, we can't.
Over.
Well, yes, we can, right?
Yes, we can. Over.
Yes,
No, we can't.
Over and over again. And so we are not here in opposition to, but in solidarity with.
That's all right. And she's speaking a little bit to what our next steps are for the RSAA. Is really collaboration with other Black-led organizations, including this commission, to kind of continue to move the work forward. And to continue to start doing some reparations campaigning with predominantly white communities here in Asheville. We know, and we've been approached by white-led churches who have reparations funds that they've been holding on to and not quite knowing where to go with that. We think it's really important that that really those white-led institutions are not making decisions on their own about what to do with those dollars. The decisions about how those dollars are being spent is in the hands of residents Black residents in Buncombe County and Asheville City. And so we're going to take the role of organizing private dollars in that sense. And we just encourage you to continue learning about our work through our website, rsaasheville.org. And we're happy to field any questions you might have.
Will you give us that website again, please?
Sure. rsaasheville.org. We can share the link with your chair and vice chair as well to disseminate it.
As far as projects and what you plan on supporting, it matches up with the Reparations Commission. How do you target what you plan on supporting? How do you identify and support those things?
Yeah. So the first work that we're doing is actually not making determinations yet of what work we're supporting with the money. We're just holding it. What we're really focusing on this year is building the system so that every member, every Black resident of our area can become a member and become part of voting what those things will, voting on what those efforts will be. And to be honest, we're timing that because we don't want to step on the heels of the commission. Right? So we're timing it so that we're hoping we are here just building infrastructure, building systems, y'all can make recommendations, and then what we're assuming is once we have a full critical mass of Black residents in our area, what we can do is share and say, hey, the City Reparations Commission has already made these wonderful recommendations. Among those, would you like some of the money to go to that, or is there something else that you'd like to go to? So essentially, we're trying to be very intentional about we're not the ones putting leads about the recommendations in front of people. What we're doing is just building a system so people can consistently be informed decision makers as part of the reparations work that's ongoing, and making sure that we're also not overstepping beyond what the commission is doing and not introducing confusion, really.
Is there a way potentially, tying back to a question that was brought up earlier, is there a way that the funding that you guys have that could be directed towards some of the things that we're concerned about that are happening in the immediate timeframe that could maybe be used to address some of those concerns or stave off some of the things that are being taken away, slow down some of the harms? Is there a way that could be coordinated?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is yes, there's a way, and the longer answer is it's really important to us, first and foremost, that this is a democratic organization and it's membership based, right? So I can't say, and the steering committee can't make decisions about where these dollars go, other than what we already know we need for operational expenses to pay for a staff member to do the work that we say we're going to do. Really what it comes down to is what the members of the organization want to do. So as we collect stakeholder members, the best that we can do is share what the work of the commission is and invite conversations in as much as possible between the commission and the RSAA. And so far, again, you have to check in with your legal counsel. But from the RSAA's positioning, there's no reason why someone who's a member of the commission couldn't just be a stakeholder as well. So we're inviting folks to just be part of the conversation. I just want to make sure we don't overstate what this organization is going to do, because the democratic piece of this, the Black Power building part of this is really critical. So I don't want to step out ahead of anything that our community might say they want to do.
Any other questions? Sisters, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Yeah. Sure. So before we move into our next item, do we have just a consensus to take a quick break? I'm seeing some heads nodding. 5-minute break while we set up for our next presentation, and I won't keep you all long. 5-minute break. We'll return at 7:28.
we're starting, so if all the commissioners can, have a seat, all our commission members can have a seat as we get started. It is on the discussion with Christine Edwards.
All
Take it
right.
away.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to be in front of you all for too long with these presentations and discussions, but again, just to remind you, I'm Christine Edwards. I'm the new project manager for the Community Reparations Commission. And I wanted to just talk to you about onboarding and transitioning this sort of relationship in a positive way. And what that means is, obviously, this is a very unique commission. It is a commission that does receive a stipend based on attendance and participation. And so we do have to enter into an agreement to work together, as I have already done so with the IFA facilitators. With that said, I just want to kind of put it in the record, and I want to say to you all, please look out for an email from me about onboarding into this, with Civility Localized, which is my company, so that we can enter into an agreement together, so that I can make sure that you all receive your stipends for the folks that are wanting to receive those, and we can make sure that is a smooth transition moving forward. So please do pay attention to your emails over the next couple of days. I will send you a link. It's more than likely going to ask you to confirm your mailing address and ask you to confirm kind of the, participation and attendance conditions of doing this work and being compensated for this work. The next item is reviewing the new project timeline and recommendations proposal template. So as I talked about, I do hope that what we're offering are going to be guiding questions and structure for you all to use in your IFA team meetings to develop your recommendations. And also, I'm going to be presenting a new suggested timeline for the duration of this project through 2023, and this has not been approved. This has been presented in front of the city and county. This has also been presented to your chair and co-chair. However, we need to make sure that we all approve this process as a group. All right, so the contents of the presentation, it includes the role of the commission, talking about IFA engagement structure, which you all are already familiar with. I'll talk about the recommendations development template. I'll talk about the 2023 timeline, and then of course some changes and some considerations that I want to either discuss today, or you can take some time, think about it, and email me your thoughts or call me with your thoughts. And there is a presentation in your packet so you can follow along. So this, again, is the role of the commission. We always like to make sure we're reminding folks of where we started and where we're at. So our key deliverable at the end of this process is a slate of fully formed recommendations passed by majority vote by the commission to be presented as resolutions or policy recommendations to the city of Asheville in Buncombe County in a timely manner. So IFA engagement structure, you all are familiar with this structure. So the way that this group has decided, or the way that this group has come together, is that there are impact-focused areas, right? So you all are coming together, you're discussing in deep conversation under one particular topic, whether it's housing, economic development, health, etc. You all are charged with completing that research and submitting the data requests to inform your recommendations. You're utilizing those tools that are available to you to capture that input, and you're having these conversations at a monthly level and on a monthly basis. And again, the deliverable for your IFA is a list of developed recommendations that are informed by data based on your particular focus area. And some of the suggestions that I'm going to offer come from my experience working in communities and my experience working with, for example, participatory budgeting. So when we talk about sort of the common definition of reparations, there are different ways to look at it on a community level. For example, you can have a community racial justice model, which is similar to the IFA structure. You also have what's called equity investments or equity-based budgeting. So some of these concepts are also adopted from there. So in your packet, behind the presentation, you'll have what's titled Community Reparations Proposal Template, also called Recommendations Development Template. And it's going to be really important that we start documenting these ideas. Not that you already aren't, but I'm sure that in your IFAs and in my conversations with the IFA leads, it's clear to me that you're documenting these ideas, but we want to make sure that we get them into a standard format so we can start to bring them to this group regularly. So number one, you want to make sure, and then this document here, it's something that's a little bit more shareable. You can download, you can write on it. We also have it as a Google Doc that's going to be shareable across your groups. We want to make sure that every time you talk about a particular recommendation or an idea, you're giving it an identifying number. Maybe it's number 1, IFA education number 1. You give it a name, right? Name that program or initiative, describe it in detail, describe who it will serve and for what duration. Is it location-based? Is it based in Buncombe County? Is it not location-based? And this is the important part that I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose, was talking about the harm that's being addressed. We want to make sure that we can connect these recommendations back to the harmful policy or action that's being addressed by passing this recommendation, program, or initiative. The next item is describe the community impact that will be felt both in the short term and the long term if this recommendation were to be passed. And describe that impact. Will it have an impact on a small group of people, a small organization, a neighborhood, or is it going to have a wider impact on all of Buncombe County or all of Asheville, right? And at this point, we're not assigning priority. We're not assigning priority level or importance level at this point. We are just being very specific about the programs and projects that we want to see passed and potentially funded. Impact level. Again, this is where you would look at that community impact and then come to a consensus in your group, right? In your IFA groups. Is this going to be a high impact, high urgency? Or is this going to be a more lower impact in terms of who all is being touched by this particular recommendation? So these are just some guiding ideas, very much open to your thoughts and comments about that. So this continues. The next thing you want to make sure that you include in your conversations and in this document is examples. Has this been done somewhere before? That is one thing that we used when I was consulting with Mecklenburg County government is, you know, a lot of times, this is just anecdotal, a lot of times county governments are a little bit more wary of what they can, you know, really allocate dollars to because they have state mandated funding. So they want to know that these projects have been done in other areas. So we want to know also, where has it been successful? So make sure you provide a link of that or a name of a program. Corresponding data resource, list that data resource that you either have access to provide or that data resource that you need access to in order to complete the recommendation, and we will work to provide that data resource. All right? This next section is, we recommend that this is completed by city and county staff because these decisions are really made at that level in terms of deciding whether the recommendation is a policy, is it a program, is it a one-time project, or is it a partnership, and also the cost. So we don't want IFA groups, and I say we, these are just my ideas and recommendations and suggestions. I don't want IFA groups to get too caught up on that cost, right? Estimating the dollar amount. Obviously, if you're knowledgeable about that dollar amount, we want to know. We would love to know a range, but we don't want you all to get sort of caught up on that. We want you to be able to submit as many ideas as possible that can be reviewed at the commission level. And then, of course, feasibility level. So again, because this process does work in partnership with government or with municipalities for some of these recommendations, we do think that it would be up to that governing body to really decide on a feasibility level, to really look at, okay, is this something that can happen in the FY '24 budget, '25, et cetera, and so forth. All right, so the electronic version of this has actually a spreadsheet that you can click on and interact with. All of your IFA leads have been trained on how to work this. There's a question, go ahead, Ms. Lily.
I do.
And tell me if you want me to,
Yeah, like,
okay.
just because we want to make sure we have time for the IFA report outs, and like we kind of, but go ahead. Dee, I think you got a question.
I do. I just wonder why the budget is left entirely up to city and county officials. That's where most of the harms happen to us. We don't have any money. And we don't deal with money. When you don't deal with money, you don't know how to deal with it either. And so a lot of us, that's what we do. That's why we're here. At least I am. If it's not about the money, I don't care about the other stuff. I'm just going to tell you the truth. And when you put that in the hands of city, and that's our money. We taxpayers too. I don't care what anybody says. And the city and county folks work for us too, as y'all know. So I'm not gonna concede that to just city staff. Like Einstein said, no problem can be solved with the same level of consciousness that created it. And they created most of the problems and policies that put us where we are. So I do not trust those budgets to be developed. I don't want to get caught up either, but I can put it up. I know how to put together a budget. I can teach other people how to do it if I need to. So I think that's patronizing, and that's just my take on it. If it's not about the money, it's not about anything.
So, just the FYI, I think Christine mentioned this at the beginning, it's like all of the stuff that y'all are seeing, because a lot of this y'all are seeing for the first time, is up for feedback and feedback and changes. This is just the draft for the proposed schedule and structure moving forward, and that's why she wanted to present it to y'all today, so that y'all can get y'all feedback and stuff to her. So Dee, definitely, well, we got your feedback now, but you can always send that to her, or either me or the chair, and we can make sure that it's also considered as a part of the further development.
Absolutely. I appreciate your comment. I think there's opportunity to work within the budgetary allotment, but also considering sources like the RSAA and partnerships, right? So really do keep that in mind. But the idea of budget, recommendation type, and feasibility level, concepts such as this are adopted from, for example, a participatory budgeting or equity-focused budget. All right, so looking at the timeline. So the timeline under the previous project manager had immediate, short-term, medium, and long-term recommendations, and the closeout of the project happening first quarter of 2024. Now here are some changes. The proposed 2023 project timeline picks up where we left off, looking at activity 5 pictured in the green, reaffirming our role, right? Reaffirming the role of the commission, but then passing that immediate recommendation in January, which did happen, right? But then, starting in February, you have activity 7 and activity 6, which has started already. So activity 6, develop the IFA recommendations, and that goes through the middle of the year. Then you also have activity 7, community input and engagement, which is happening simultaneously along with the IFA meetings. And then activity 8, which happens on top of that, which is a recommendation vetting and refinement. So what you'll find is we are going to be working through this process, and it is iterative. That means that we're going to a subcommittee level, IFA, where the ideation happens. It's all about ideas. And then we come to the body and go through those ideas, vet them, continuous vetting, and we're also working in, I'm working with city and county and legal, and just making sure we're staying organized, and I'm collecting all of your ideas and getting those vetting things to happen on an iterative basis. And so, and it is a little aggressive, but I heard you loud and clear when you said we're not doing enough right now. And so that was one of the things that I wanted to build in, was an opportunity to see recommendations sooner, okay? And then this timeline has the written report and the project closeout at the end of October or the start of November of this year. I'm happy to work with y'all on that, but I think that this definitely takes advantage of a really active and engaged commission that we have. And the next pages just go step by step, really breaking down what happens in each of these activities and how long each activity lasts. Again, I don't want to be in front of y'all too long because you probably want some time to really think about this. But I will say, I do think this is probably going to change, seeing where we are right now with our schedule. We are slated to have those sort of round one recommendations or the thoughts and ideas from your IFAs. We are slated to have those up for review in February. So that's where we're at. And then it would be round 1, 2, and 3 in the final slate rather than short, medium, long term. All right. And in terms of activity 10, the written report and closeout, the recommendations that are passed by the commission will be compiled and presented to the governing bodies, shared with the wider public, and I will lead the development of writing the reparations action plan. At that time, we're going to be making sure we are citing everybody's contributions. All right, changes and considerations. So the main difference is that prioritization is no longer based on short, medium, or long term, but rather on feasibility and community impact, and just making sure that the projects with the biggest impact or the consensus is drawn upon what to bring to the group. Recommendations should be fairly broad. They should not be connected to any particular group, organization, or existing initiative. Do you have a comment, Ms. Little?
I really like, I'm just timekeeping, because it's about to be 7:50, and I definitely want our IFA groups to report out on their updates. And so a lot of this is in, like, if you could bullet point, and we see it, and so a lot of it is in our thing, and so we do want to make sure we have time to get to them before the end of our meeting. Just consideration of everybody's time.
That makes sense to me.
Thank
I want to
you.
make sure that y'all have a clear understanding of what the suggested changes are. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Please.
So on the timeline, it ended at 2023. I don't believe we were seated until April of last year.
Oh, that, if you look at, sorry, it's 2023 is the main heading for the whole section up there.
So we will continue into 2024.
Not under this timeline.
So we won't get our full 2 years that we were slated to get to make this happen? Because we would not have been here for in total a year until April of this year. And initially it was a 2-year term to get this work done. I get the aggressiveness of wanting to get the work done, but I would also like the allotted time that was given to this body to be able to deliberate and give good recommendations and be able to vet that. So my main concern, other than some other things that I see in this, is the time frame. We're not even given our whole 2 years. Some boards are seated for 4 years. Members of boards are seated for 4 years. We were sat for 2 years, and we're not even getting that. So I would say there's a lot wrong, in my view, of this timeline. That doesn't include anything else that I have that I will address with the body and others separately, but just on the first glance, this is not it. The aggressiveness of getting things done is great, but shortchanging us on such a monumental effort is a slap in the face.
Wow, thank you for your feedback. I'm gonna make sure that we receive that and we're recording that for sure, for sure. I definitely hear you loud and clear. I will probably have to talk to city and county about that project management, but I think it makes sense. It makes sense. So if y'all are seated in 2022, then wrap up and close out in 2024 makes sense to me. Any other feedback? Go ahead.
I have more feedback, but on the interest of time, I'll save those for later, and I will address them with the larger group as well, so they'll be able to hear me.
So,
What's that?
I said, don't leave us hanging. If you gotta say it
No, I think that was the most important thing.
Okay.
But there are some other things that are in the weeds that I would have to, before I speak, I want to make sure that I'm speaking,
All right.
I'm educated on what I'm speaking about.
All right.
I don't want to
It's
just
also-
put something out there.
One way of thinking about this as being the first read. The second read is trying to listen to more detailed criticism.
Dr. Martin, can I speak quickly to the timeline? The updated timeline was created in response to what we're hearing. You know, we want to make sure that we get things done in a timely manner and don't drag it along. But the intention of the city and county is to take however amount of time that you all need to make recommendations. So I just wanted to make sure that you all know that that's definitely our intention, to make sure that we can move as fast as y'all want us to move, or y'all want to move, or take as much time as we need. We're not tied to the 2 years. It can be 3 years. You can take whatever you need, but we also hear that there's some immediate needs, some things that need to happen as soon as possible. And so our ask of her is to look at the timeline and see how we can get things done sooner to help to accomplish that goal. But as much time as y'all need, we'll take whatever time it needs to get this done.
My inbox is open for your comments. I want to make sure that I'm able to adjust this based on everybody's thoughts and comments. So I really do appreciate your time, and I apologize for being in front of you too long, but this is also going to be sent to you, so you'll have an opportunity to review it. One last comment?
Just real quick, so will this be something that will be up to vote to approve?
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, well, I do think it would be useful for the IFA to start using some structure, in terms of recording, what's been discussed in meetings, but I do think that if this is an item that needs to be voted on, that works.
Yeah, it will be voted on by the full commission. That's the answer.
When we have a date?
Well, y'all just now really seeing this in its fullness, and so it is in the packet that was on the thing. So please give her y'all comments, and so it'll come before us next month at our next meeting with those edits and updates based on the feedback of this commission. So please get her all the feedback y'all want.
Can we build some time out to discuss it?
Yeah,
I'd like to
and we
hear
will
what
build
people
that
have to
into
say.
the next meeting so we can discuss it as it has been updated based on the comments and feedback.
Did we finish everything that's on the agenda today?
No, so the IFA, that's the part I was trying to get to. So up next is the IFA updates. And so I definitely want us, and if y'all would be so gracious as to grace us with an additional 15 minutes. 15 minutes, so that we do have time to hear from our IFA groups. I think it's super important that we do hear from them in each session. Yes, Keith?
Whatever y'all decide is great. I can't stay beyond 8 o'clock, but I would make a recommendation that at every meeting forthcoming that be moved to the top.
Yes. Yes, it has been noted and amended in our minutes from last week.
Can we make it that, people have comments, there may be some of their questions or comments they can put into Christine. That took up a lot of our time tonight. Just people, questions and stuff. So some of the important things that she can address or you all can address, and we can just make sure that they just send that to you instead of me taking up all the time.
So I definitely hear you, and I'm more of this meeting is for people, our voices to be heard, because we do not meet as a full commission often, we once a month. And so when they have questions, when things are just presented, it's going to be questions. And I don't want people to feel like they can't ask them at the time that they need to ask them. So we definitely take that in consideration. It is being noted. And thank y'all so much. But can I get a show of hands if y'all would dedicate 15 minutes to our IFA report outs, please? Okay, so, all right, thank y'all. Y'all the best. Okay, this is economic. The spokesperson for economic development is up to get an update for the economic development group. Who is the spokesperson? Is it Mr. Barton?
It's three of us, and right now, I think that the person who is most prepared to speak, there are some things that amongst our recommendations that we have not been able to quantify yet, and that's essential to what we're doing. Some have been, and I think Ms. Williams can speak to the ones that have been quantified, and I think that's the portion of our IFA that we can speak to tonight.
Okay.
Can we give them 5 minutes
Okay,
each,
so
that we get through that 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And just one spokesperson, please.
Yeah, it is. That's what they was
Basically,
identifying.
what we quantified were capacity building funds for each of the 4 neighborhoods. And I know it's changed based on what we got tonight, that it wouldn't be done by neighborhoods. But we do recognize that every neighborhood, legacy black neighborhood in Asheville, put forth a plan, 10, 12 years ago, and nothing's been done about it. It's like we've abrogated that methodology. But anyway, what we thought we'd do would be to honor those and provide them with capacity building grants. And I did send that out to several of y'all on the committee electronically. I think I sent it out Friday. And also did build in a capital plan for folks who did have schematics or A&I drawings or whatever. And what we'd like to do is get, and I guess we still would like to honor the neighborhoods, since y'all put this work in. I know things are changing, but I think it's up to this body to really decide how y'all want to do that, to honor it or not, because that's the way we started, is looking at the existing neighborhood plans that are, including Southside, who really doesn't even have a neighborhood plan, but we feel like they should have capacity building. And I think that budget was about $300,000 per each of the 4 black legacy neighborhoods. That capacity building would be in the form of someone coming in and providing them with technical assistance to flesh out those plans and make them walk. To put budgets together to help them put the capital plans in order. And we also devised something of a capital plan based on the square footage of the Blue Note incubator out on Burke Street at the center now for the basement, which is about almost 6,000 square feet. And we approximated that cost to be about $1.23 million. So heads up to all you other community groups. If you've got some A&E stuff, some schematics and some plans, smoke them over and send them this way. And we'll put a dollar amount on it. I was just talking to Dwayne. Usually right now we're looking at about $220 a square foot finish. If you want programs and budgets for that, then tell us what those are. We can put those together and sit down and explain it to you. That's all I got. If you got any questions, just ask me.
A&E being architecture and engineering.
Engineer, sorry.
Yeah. So if you have architectural or engineering plans in place that we can quantify from, that would make the process faster and easier.
This is apart from any formats or templates or anything. This is my request, is that in federal processes, in many states also, there's an authorization and appropriations process. But the authorization explains, it's a narrative, it's an overview, it's a principle statement. It kind of unites and explains why we need and what we're trying to do. while the second part of it is the meat and bones of it. It's the details, the data. So in order to facilitate and accelerate, I wonder if we could get that first statement from you on economic development and the narrative of what it is we're trying to do. If we don't have all the data to support it yet, it won't hold up our whole process. I wonder if that's a possibility.
We may need to look at legacy neighborhoods, Dr. Mullen, to be very frank. We want to honor that. These neighborhoods are truly at risk, just
Yes.
like was talked about. And the only way to stop harm is to stop it.
You know, that's why I'm saying a narrative might be a really powerful statement. Seriously.
I had a suggestion from a county official that maybe one of the things that we include in our recommendations is the, once we have a feasibility study, cost estimate, things of that nature, that we include the cost of bringing in the professionals to do the assessment as part of our budgetary request, so that we can make certain that we can hire the proper professionals to appropriately quantify and create plans for us to go forward and to assess structures that have to be redone. We would need engineer recommendations to back up what it is we're requesting. And if we have those
that
professionals.
in the budget for project manager and construction manager and we've used Burton Street as a prototype since they did have the square footage and the architectural specifications and plans. We're happy to do it for any neighborhood. Once you smoke it over, you know, send it our way, and we'll put the numbers together for you. We'll even show you know, what they mean, which is important. You need to know what they mean. You need to be able to lead your process
And
with your facilitator.
To throw in an example, we thought that Shiloh, by example, with facilities that the Shiloh Community Center offers, Shiloh might be a good location to have education centers where they have the most community investment right now already ongoing, and somebody may speak to that. And that's just one of the proposals. That's not something that is somehow poured into concrete. I'm just saying, by comparison, we have the Blue Note a project in West Asheville, but then if we were looking at maybe what the potential is for the other communities, Shiloh has the community center that has an education center and is already receiving funding and is kind of stable in its existence.
Ms. Norma, I see your hand raised, I'm sorry.
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that about Shiloh. But I want to also say Shiloh, we have our Shiloh Community Association, and we also are in the process of doing fundraising for our resource center, which includes a lot of educational programs and other things that would help our community, such as jobs and all the other activities that we have with our community garden. So we would really, even though we are happy that the center is there, we're sure that the residents would like to see something that they are developing in our community, and this is what we're trying to do.
And I did not mean to speak for Shiloh in that instance. Let me be clear. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Barber.
In response to Dwayne, when education, probably you should have been more inclusive to what you were saying.
I agree.
The education piece is not to take anything away from the resource center, because I am from Shiloh, but it was to implement something for someone to come in for kids, for education, for schooling, for pre-K through maybe second or third grade, and giving back our centers. For that's the educational piece that she missed. It's not talking about taking away from what the resource center would be, but this would be almost like a school. That's what you were talking about, your educational piece. Yeah. So that's what I just wanted to make. I didn't want her to think that.
We put like $92,000 initially in so that somebody could come help y'all flesh that educational piece out. Whatever you want to do. We'll talk to you.
So, any more from the Economic Development Group? In the meantime, I really would like to get to education as a spokesperson for the education group here.
Chris is going to speak first today.
I've been elected to do it again. So we haven't met since our last meeting, but we do have a couple of things in the works. Let me pull up my notes here. We have a meeting tomorrow. We're looking at finalizing a recommendation for black teacher recruitment and retention. We also have in the works a stop the harm proposal recommendation regarding student suspensions and expulsions. We have a presentation from the Buncombe County Data Team on the 24th. We have a presentation from the City and County Legal Team on February 13th. So the work continues. We meet at the YWCA on those dates. Everybody's welcome to come. Hopefully we'll have something concrete at our next meeting, our next commissioners meeting, or we have some recommendations that we can present to the group. That's about all I have. Cece, do you have anything to add?
Nope, that's it for now.
Thank you.
Questions?
Is this all the agenda for this time?
That's it.
Hallelujah, I'm sorry.
Thank y'all so much. Oh, do we have? No.
Do we have public comment?
No, there are no public comments.
There we go.
Yes.
What you would say?
So, the meeting, January 9th, 2023, Community Reparations Commission is adjourned. Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we out of here. Thank y'all.